wrote the first book, or maybe 30 years ago, and it ought to be an entertaining speech, and the last time he was here, every seat was taken. So now I'm going to introduce Larry Roberts, who's the founder and chairman of Anagram Incorporated, which manufactures flow rate management network equipment, the first major improvement in the technology in the 40 years since he designed and managed packet switching. He designed and managed the first packet network, the ARPANET, which is now the Internet. And Dr. Roberts has a BS, MS, and PhD from MIT. He's received numerous awards for his work, including Secretary of Defense Meritorious Service Medal, the L.M. Erickson Prize for Research and Data Communications, the IEEE Internet Award, and the NEC Computer Communication Award. But more importantly, he started studying the role of supplements in 1990 for better health and maintaining mental sharpness. In 1992, he and Catherine Gross started the Smart Life Forum in his home to gain the benefit of experience of many others with similar interests. So I give you Larry Roberts.
Thank you very much. Is this? Yeah, this is working. Okay. Well, it's a big crowd. When we were doing it at my house, we didn't have this many. We couldn't. But in any case, we did get this kind of exchange going, and we certainly needed it then. Not many people were as involved as many of us are today. I started reading and saw that there was something that could be done for your health with supplements and natural substances and maintaining a high quality of life for a longer period. Now I'm 70 and I'm still feeling like I was 40, so I think it's working pretty well. I started 5 different companies since I started the internet, and those companies have been tremendously challenging, and this current one is as well. We're really changing the internet now to something that can give you much better service and video and the like, so that's what I'm trying to do at the moment. What I'm going to talk about is what I've been doing for my brain over this period of time, and we can do the lights. I don't know how to get the lights. Okay.
Good enough.
That's good.
Well, in any case, it's as good as we can make it, I guess. I started with basically finding 3 different things that were particularly important and valuable, and I've been doing them ever since. Paracetam, which is a tremendous producer of activity in your brain, and couples the left and right side of the brain so that creativity is more effective. It's used for strokes a lot because you can actually improve the production of ATP and oxygen utilization tremendously in the brain. And it's often used for people doing things at high altitudes where they need better oxygen utilization. I do quite a heavy dose of 4.8 grams, but people are typically do anywhere from 1,200 to 3,600. I also know one person who did huge amounts, and they just became even more productive and effective. But of course, getting huge amounts and consuming huge amounts is also expensive. And in fact, not harmful, however. It's actually continues to be effective at any dose. It's a no-triple, which means it doesn't have any upper limit. The DME I started doing as well, and I use about 600 milligrams a day. And it's a precursor to choline, but it crosses the blood-brain barrier, so it gets it into your brain and enhances the memory, energy, mood, and cognitive skills. The cognitive results are relatively new, and in fact, maybe Teddy can mention more about that if you want to ask any questions, because she's just been reading the recent literature. The vinpocetine is a pretty powerful mechanism to improve the blood circulation in the brain and improve the circulation, and it increases ATP as well, and it's a memory enhancer, and it increases the production of norepinephrine in the brain as well, so it improves cognition. So those were the three things I started doing. When I started doing those, what I found was that instead of winding up as I was at that time, mainly being able to manage, given my long history in my business, but not being really able to have enough short-term or medium-term memory to create and do design, I wound up with the need to get back to where I could design and I could be creative and make the entire design like I had been able to do up to that point in time. And things improved very rapidly, and I quickly got back to the place where I was able to do in the previous company that I did the entire ASIC design for the system, the entire all the data structures and everything in one document as I was starting the company, and that was built and worked perfectly. The process was one where you need to be able to remember what you've done with everything and not put something back in the same place that it shouldn't have been, or something else is. All the programmers know about the problems of keeping track. You lose track for a while and you've got real problems. Well, that's what all of this did. It restored me to where I was, where I could do the kind of creative work, and that's been true ever since. I've been able to do that, and this latest system is additional proof of that, the latest company's product. I also started doing a lot of other things, which now I'm told by Tedde Rinker, my wife, who we'll talk later, her business is anti-aging medicine, that these things are also helping my brain, even though I thought they were just helping my health. Most of them are antioxidants. Melatonin was partly to control jet lag. We now know it's probably one of the most powerful antioxidants that you can have. It can gobble up 250 ions, where vitamin C may get one molecule away. So vitamin C is very effective because it's, and I do about 10 grams a day, and that's been happening since way back then. And melatonin we've increased considerably since then to more like an abnormally high amount because it's such a good antioxidant. And Deprinyl I've been using mainly to protect myself from dopamine reduction and losing my dopamine over time, which happens. And this protects the dopamine receptors and improves the health, and that I've been doing since then. But it also improves the health and function of all the neurons. And the multivitamins have a lot of other free radical damage eliminators, antioxidants, and as well as the high dose vitamin B. So of other things I was doing, of which there were many others, these were also helping my brain. Now, since then, as Teddy keeps on checking every part of my blood for everything she can think of, she's added a huge number of other substances. So now I take a lot of vitamin E and a lot of coenzyme Q10 and DIM, selenium, zinc, GPC, which is more acetylcholine production, and curcumin, which I thought was mainly for cancer, but it also helps the inflammation. And the omega-3 is what you're really making your brain out of, and so I've increased that considerably so that I could keep replenishing all of my material every 3 months. and 5-HTP and tyrosine. And so I do a whole bunch of other things at this point. And these are only a small set of what I'm doing, because she has me on a total of 50 different things, different pills and substances. But these are the ones that are working for the brain. The main thing I wanted to say here was that this works, that my brain is still working like it was when I did the internet, when I was in 29 or so. And at that point, I designed the internet and built it and got it working to the point where it proved that it was really effective. Carrying on from there, Bob Connon did TCP/IP and finished the protocol, and that's what we're working with now. And eventually we'll switch to IPv6, which is the next version for even more address space. We had to change the protocol occasionally because of the address space, because now we have to handle not only every person in the world, but everything they wear, every device that they might have, every wall switch in the home, whatever. But we've been building all of these different things. I have to be able to keep my brain working so that I can stay on top of this field and do the design and know exactly what the product does and how it will work, and looking at the evidence of what we do and making sure I know what the effect is. So I would recommend anybody to do at least the first 3 things, and add all of the antioxidants and other things, of course, as well. Oh, you want to keep looking at it? Okay.
Do you have a website that has all that on it?
Actually, there used to be one. I don't know. I haven't looked to see if it's still there.
Could you put on ours if you like?
Well, we'll look into that. I actually have a complete list. So.
What is your website?
Well, I don't. My website is packet.cc, packet.cc. I don't have anything about this on there. And Teddy's website is stressmedicine. Stress-medicine.com. But we'll figure out someplace to put it. I don't know exactly where. But you know, I also do a whole pile of other things. But those things get pretty particular to what the blood tests are. In other words, you can't just add everything and say it's going to help everybody. You've got to be careful as to what you're doing for what your own particular characteristics are and what your body's like at the moment. I don't have a lot more that I wanted to try and cover, so we're going, yes.
So you take a lot of melatonin, how much is a lot?
Well, it's a 30 milligram tablet that's... we have it compounded because it doesn't come in that size. Yeah.
What about ALA? Some people say it can be converted, and some people. Udo Rasmus believes it can.
I believe it can too. I think your body will convert it.
I'm sorry?
I think your body will convert alpha-linolenic acid, you're saying ALA, to the EPA and the anti-inflammatory eicosanoids that you need as your body needs it. So I've seen really good responses using that. So people that are allergic to fish, that's a really good alternative.
I let her answer because she's better at it than I am in that case. Much better, yes. Yes.
Could you repeat the question?
He said there was other variants of paracetam, and I couldn't get all the words, but...
I was just wondering if you tried the other one,
No, I don't keep trying different things if something's working, so I haven't been doing that. Yes?
Have you ever had your neurotransmitters tested?
Yes?
By, in what lab?
Sedesco.
Senesco?
I have a hair Senesco with neuroscience.
Well, I'd have to
Both
ask you.
neuroscience and Senesco, the scientists that founded both of those, together developed the testing for neurotransmitters. So they're both really good. And it just depends on how, which test you like. And, the neuroscience does more neurotransmitters. The Senesco does the main thinking and good neurotransmitters.
So you
They're
don't-
both good.
You don't think one's necessary here to do it?
No, I don't. They both use the same techniques. They invented them together. Two guys that founded those two.
Yes.
Isn't there a problem with neurotransmitters that are tested that way that isn't done through spinal fluid? That it's actually, they're just those that exist in the gut, and they're not really the ones that exist in the brain?
I thought that for years, and so I. Okay, so I used to think for years. Well, come on now. We make 95% of the serotonin we make is in the gut. So if you measure serotonin in the urine, how's that going to tell us what's going on in the brain? But it turns out, I've learned this research through going to conferences where they are presenting this research, that when the kidney has a direct connection to the brain through the vagus nerve, and so it's getting information directly from the vagus nerve about what's going on in the brain, and it attempts to create a mirror image of what's going on in the brain. And so what they found is they would measure serum neurotransmitters and urine neurotransmitters and see that they're quite different, that the balances between the two were different. So our kidney was actually changing the neurotransmitters, and based on what they know about how neurotransmitters, the various symptoms that deficiencies in neurotransmitters cause, they could see correlation with the urine neurotransmitter levels and the symptoms that they saw. And they, Senesco says they've studied over 300,000 people, urine tests, to validate the symptom correlation and then replenishing those neurotransmitters, and then seeing results in the urine of improvement, and then seeing the symptoms improve. So
you favor urine test over serum test?
yes.
Well, I don't know how long this is supposed to go on, so.
Are you still taking testosterone shots?
Yes, I have stayed with shots. The cream is actually preferred by most people, but I know how to measure the shots. I don't mind shots. I do shots every day of something, both HGH and testosterone. So I do testosterone now every 2 days because it's too long in between if I don't do it every 2 days. But I have to keep the amount correct, so based on the blood test. And that works very well. I found if I didn't take my testosterone and I would go into work, and when I was raising money with venture capitalists, I would not, I'd say, they'll call me if they've read it, and then the next day I'd do my testosterone, I'd go in and my God, I got to call them, they're never going to call me. And I'd call them. So it was a huge difference, obviously.
Do you find there's any problem with aromatase conversion with testosterone to estradiol?
Oh yes, I have troubles in terms of the conversion, and it's always a balance to keep it.
Are you taking the aromatase inhibitor?
No. I
Take
do.
supplements to improve estradiol metabolism, but not an inhibitor of aromatase.
I take other supplements to help, but not an inhibitor.
You can actually take pumpkin seeds, and that protects that from ever happening. And there's a chrysin. Chrysin is also a aromatase inhibitor, and so is D3. So those three things are very protective.
Yes.
The markers for multiple sclerosis is brain lesions with a brain scan. Have any of these supplements been tried on reversing brain lesions?
I don't know about I don't know about the studies of that.
Yeah, lithium has just recently been published by 2 papers in Italy to actually stop the progression of Lou Gehrig's disease, and I've also used it for MS very successfully with high D3 and a histamine patch. that this woman developed in Washington. So it's very effective.
Can you say something about the discipline tab?
Well, what it is, it's, I don't have enough time, but there's an RN up in Washington, and she developed a transdermal patch using histamine, and she herself has MS, and it's been very successful on some cases of MS, depending on the progression of the MS, what type it is, but I've seen 2 or 3 people recover totally from wheelchairs using that. And I'll get you her name, you know, and you can order from her. She's done a lot of work in that area.
Cordell?
So I had the privilege of working for this guy when he was in the process of inventing the first packet switching net, which became the ARPANET, and then transitioning that to the internet. So this is actually the guy who did it. What he didn't tell you was how hard he worked for the people who worked for him.
Oh, well.
Wasn't Al Gore.
Actually, most of the questions you're trying to ask me, you should be asking Teddy at this point, because once I got together with Teddy, and that's her business, I tended to my business and let her fix my body, and I don't do the kind of studying that I used to do, or had to do it myself. One story I'll tell you though about the paracetam and the brain activity. We went to one of the conferences at the A4M, and they were testing the speed of your brain response from an auditory input pulse to where they could see in the brain scan when it arrived, or from a test probe when it arrived at a certain place in the brain. And they normally tell your age this way as far as how old your brain is, and they give you an age grade. My age came out to be that I was a baby.
5-year-old.
Something very young, a few years old. And the doctor was unbelieving it and said that I just must be hyper and very weird. But actually, I had done a lot of my paracetam that morning, and my brain just operates that fast. That's what it does. Teddy came out to be a young teen, so she was not taking as much as me. But,
I don't take as much as you.
but I think we're about ready to shift, aren't we?
Yes, we are. I think before we take the break, Corinne Friedlander wanted to talk about a lecture he's giving. 5 minutes.
5 minutes? Well, I just want to just mention, can you hear me? Yes. Okay, take this date down if you want to be there on November 2nd. We just did this morning, so we got a date on November 2nd, 12 to 4 p.m. It's going to be at 67 Spear Street between Market and Mission, which we've been giving the lecture, and a number of you have been there before. And it's going to be from 12 to 4, and registration will be $35 including lunch, and $25 not including lunch. And take down the phone number if you want to call them and set up a reservation for them. It's 415-371-0333. And I'll have
I'm totally wired with 2 microphones here, and okay. Light. Hi, everybody. I'm going to be talking about The Renegade Patient, the book I just wrote. And I wrote this book because I spent a lot of years as a psychiatrist with a holistic orientation, so I was very interested in the whole body. And that's one of the things I think that osteopathic medical school taught me, was to think of the whole body as an integrated whole. So when I went into psychiatry, I really didn't think about the brain and the body as separate, separate things, actually like most psychiatrists do. I was looking at the whole self, and when I started my practice, I started right off calling it stress medicine. And stress medicine consulting, or
Center for Stress Medicine, and I've been doing this for 20 years. I moved away from psychiatry as I started to make diagnoses of these people with psychiatric symptoms. I got referrals from a lot of doctors because people had multi-system complaints. They call them CROCs. That's what. Are there any healthcare practitioners here? There are some, aren't there? See, raise your hand. Any healthcare practitioners? I'm going to try not to piss you off. I really will. I think here there's probably less of a chance of that, but you know, I've got some anger about what's happened to medicine in this country, and I've just heard so many stories from these patients that were sent to a psychiatrist, mostly because their symptoms were complex, and doctors didn't want to be bothered. They have, you know, physicians memorize a certain list of symptoms and a certain group of tests, and then these medications, you know, and that's it. They memorize that diagram and then they just kind of do it by rote. So I just thought there's something really wrong with this system. There's a lot of books out there right now about what's wrong with our medical system. And most of them, when I scanned through them, they just said, you know, contact your congressman. We need national health care, or contact your representative. And I thought, you know, we need something right now. People need something right now. What do you do to take care of yourself? Because we can't change the system first. I mean, we'll be dead before the system gets changed. So I wanted to, I acted as an advocate for my patients a lot of times. I'd be sitting down explaining to them what a doctor told them because they didn't understand it, or what it meant. Or I'd be going over this medication they'd just been prescribed and telling them all the possible side effects and the interactions with the other medications they were taking, or, you know, some of the risks involved in taking that. So I found that I was being a kind of a patient advocate. I was teaching them that they had a right to their records, and if their doctor refused, I'd get the records and I'd just give them to them. So I thought people had a right to these things and should be more powerful in taking care of themselves and knowing more about their bodies. So, and my patients taught me a lot of things too. I had a lot of people that just wanted to, you know, this group of people is just a wonderful group. I feel like almost like I'm preaching to the choir to talk to you about being Renegade patients, because a group like this where people are standing up and sharing things they've read and recommending doctors that do this or do that, or are doing some kind of research or nutritional supplements or some research they read, and you're sharing this information. It's wonderful. You're really lucky to have this organization, and I'm impressed that you're here and that you're doing this for yourselves. I think it's just great. So I try to encourage people to do this kind of stuff for themselves. So maybe some of my stuff will be a little redundant because you already know that, but I'll try to get some useful information to you. So I got board certified in anti-aging medicine, mostly because I saw that they were using hormones, you know, natural hormones, in a whole system approach, and I was already kind of going in that direction. And I thought, well, the best way to learn this is to get board certified, but I really wasn't focusing on having people be young forever so much as staying healthy for the rest of their lives. And so that was kind of being young from the inside out was what I was more interested in. So, so one of the things I think about in terms of being a Renegade patient is owning your own health care and managing it responsibly. So I think I just said this. You don't have time for the system to change. So there is something called the Bill of Rights for Health Care. It's been this document that has been in process from 1996. It was first written by the Healthcare Advisory Board as advice, the kind of things that people should have a right to, and then it became the HIPAA law, the Health Insurance Protection and Privacy Act, that was enacted in 1998 and slowly became law up until 2003, where all the parts of it became law. And that's supposed to help you be a more powerful patient. It's now a law. It's not very well enforced, but it does give you some power to get access to records and information that you didn't have before. But I was thinking that what we need before we have a Bill of Rights is we need to become independent from a lot of the myths and stories that we've been told about how we should be compliant patients and we should accept the advertising and the marketing and the promotion and what God the doctor tells us we have to do. So I wrote this Declaration of Independence as a way of saying, you know, we've got to free ourselves of these myths. So it's kind of like sign on to this for yourself. And so I thought of all the things that I think keep us in check or keep us from having what we need in terms of health care. And then I wrote these declarations. We the people being of sound mind and an independent spirit do hereby declare ourselves to be free from these myths that keep us from getting optimal health. We reject the myth that the doctor has all the answers. We reject the myth that health insurance companies exist for the benefit of our health. We know that's not true, right? We are skeptical of pharmaceutical companies that control their own research and reject the notion that all FDA-approved drugs are safe or that non-FDA-approved treatments are automatically unsafe. We demand more information from the nutraceutical industry about risks, benefits, and product contents. We reject the myth that there's only one legitimate or standard type of medical practice and the belief that the double-blind, placebo-controlled study is the only way to prove that a treatment is effective. This has become the gold standard, mostly because it protects patented medicines and proves that they work better than a placebo. So, but now it's been this dogma that has taken over the medical, our medical culture, is that if you don't have a large, double-blind, placebo-controlled study, then whatever treatment you're proposing, even though it seems to have worked on a couple thousand people, is not valid. So I reject that myth. We declare ourselves to be competent to make informed decisions about our health and well-being and want to be part of every decision concerning our health and recovery from illness. If a healthcare provider cannot agree to these stipulations, we may choose a different provider. And I think, you know, we'll be running into physician defensiveness and physician arrogance and territoriality. I know there's a lot of doctors that are personally offended if you want to get a second opinion. But if someone's personally offended that you want a second opinion, that's their problem. You have every right to that. And there's no reason for a doctor to be offended by that. So I became kind of a renegade doctor partly because I had this kind of eclectic education based on my curiosity and what I thought I needed to learn to help people. Partly I went to an osteopathic medical school, and the philosophy of osteopathic medicine is that if we assist the body to become healthier, it can heal itself. So that's the philosophy of osteopathic medicine. Now you might say, oh, I know DOs, they do the same things MDs do. Well, you know what? That's true. The philosophy of osteopathy is a holistic philosophy, but unfortunately the osteopathic profession is just as strongly influenced by pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies, and they've accepted a lot of this dogma. I mean, there are osteopaths, there are MDs who are renegades, who do something different or take their own path or follow their intuition or do their own research. And but the philosophy did stick with me. I really thought that was a valid thing. I was trained in allopathic medicine. I did 2 residencies, one at Wayne State University and one at UCSF in San Francisco. So I got to see the MD model. You know, I was completely immersed in it in my residency training, and so I learned a lot about memorizing the diagrams, the symptoms, the tests, the treatments, and I kind of bought into that and did that for a long time myself. But then I saw that there was a lot of exceptions to these rules, and that a lot of people didn't get better, and I didn't like it that they didn't get better. I have a reverence for the human body. I just think that human beings are miracles. It's amazing. I loved medical school. I loved learning how the body's put together and how it works. And you know, that's the conventional medical model. That's what I learned. But I learned a lot of amazing things about how our bodies work. And just, I thought, you know, if I keep studying this, if I keep learning this, and if I can teach it to other people, we can all learn to heal ourselves. I went into psychiatry because it was one of the fields where they were still asking questions. They weren't just spitting out treatments. About the time I was in my last year of residency, it was pretty much the same as the other. I mean, all these new drugs came into psychiatry, so they had that same paradigm. Most medical schools don't teach nutrition. It's maybe about 2 weeks long. That's all we get. The new codex laws that are coming through, I don't know if you know about codex, but President Bush did sign the codex agreement. And although it hasn't happened like it has in European countries where anything over the RDA is now considered a prescription type drug, and you can't go in a health food store in Europe and get more than 60 IUs of vitamin E. And that could be coming to our country too. I think nutrition is really important. I think we should fight for the right to not have codex enacted in our country, and that we can make these choices ourselves. We can learn about nutrition. We can learn about our health and use these things. So I did study nutrition on my own because I was interested in it, and environmental factors. I have been working with stress for 25 years, either from a psychological perspective or a physiological perspective, and I found myself coming back to stress, not as a psychiatric issue, but as a multi-system physiologic problem as well as an emotional perception issue. So I think conventional medicine fails to effectively treat stress to the body's system. They've recognized it. There's research in the conventional medical literature about the effect of stress, but they don't address it. They don't think this is important enough to treat. They might say, well, your problem is stress. I think that conventional medicine really ignores the complexity of the thyroid-adrenal axis and how it affects other systems. And I think that many, many people have imbalances in their thyroid system and in their adrenal system, and that affects their hormones, and that affects how their brain works, and that affects how they feel, and that affects their nutrition, and that they're all interrelated. And that interrelatedness, the way medicine has developed today, is it's a series of boxes, and a doctor goes into one box and he learns, like ear, nose, and throat, he learns everything here and doesn't relate it to the rest of the body. And so they don't learn that marvelous integrated phenomenon that we are as human beings. They don't look at chronic illness other than as with palliation, like, take some pain meds, take some anti-inflammatory meds, rest, I'll put you on disability. But chronic illness is something we need to take very seriously. I think that, especially as our population gets older, but also there's infectious diseases and toxins that are, and mold, and we talk about a lot of this, and the combination of all of these things is probably the biggest health problem that we have today. It's this mix of things. So and the relationship between physical and mental health, how being sad, being frightened can make you physically ill, or being ill can make you frightened and sad. So the cost of being a compliant patient, of taking those prescriptions that are handed to you, is very high. We spend $98 million per year on over-the-counter remedies just to get a good night's sleep, and another $3 billion a year on prescription sleep drugs. $4 billion per year are spent on headache and pain remedies. $14 billion on cholesterol-reducing drugs, when most of the time our cholesterol is just fine. But now the FDA has approved cholesterol drugs for children. And now children are getting statins to reduce their cholesterol. Cholesterol, we make our own cholesterol, and we use it to make our brain tissues. To make, myelin is 99.9% cholesterol. Our brain cells are 25% cholesterol. Our immune system, our white blood cells are made up of cholesterol, and all of our hormones. What are they doing giving statins to little kids? I find this insane. $113 billion a year for prescription drugs in general per year. That's what we spend. Are we feeling better now? No, we're not. We're some of the most unhealthy people on the planet. The Americans are. So why do conditions of chronic illness go untreated? There's the political issues. It's who controls healthcare policy. I guess, you know, our Congress controls healthcare policy, but who controls Congress? Who do you think controls Congress? Yeah, it's money. So there's the financial interests of the healthcare industries. There's the pharmaceutical industry, and there's the insurance industry, and all of their various branches. And they have a huge influence on healthcare policy. Also, that power causes a terrible strain on doctors who are trying to do healthcare. The pressures on physicians are enormous. The influence, you know, I mean, they do direct marketing. You've seen it if you watch TV, where you're being marketed for drugs all the time. Like, I want this prescription. It's going to change my life. You go in and you ask for that drug. Now, I don't hate prescription drugs. I think there's a lot of really good prescription drugs. I just think that it's become the politics of our country, and that healthcare, we're losing healthcare, you know, in the name of making more and more pharmaceutical drugs. There's a social culture in medicine that enforces and encourages the physician to be indifferent to the patient. I can remember in my residency training how we, you know, I say we because I was doing it too, we were laughing at patients. We're calling them names. And it's part of the medical culture. I'm really ashamed that I was part of that I was doing that too. You know, we had names. I don't know if you've heard the term Gomer. Has anybody heard that? They say, that guy's a real Gomer. That means get out of my ER. That's what it stands for. It makes me sick. You know, it makes me sick that, I mean, I used to be an ER physician. And, excuse me. And I see how our culture in medicine is, dehumanizes the human being. And maybe it's a defense against the overwhelming task of working in the medical field, but it's a tragedy that this is how we behave in medicine. This is how physicians behave. They have other names, you know, crocs, gomers, hypochondriacs. You know, I'd ask for referrals of these people, and I wanted these people for my patients because I know that if I worked with them, they'd teach me something, and I'd help them find out what's really wrong. So that's who I wanted for patients after I realized what I was doing or what I was being acculturated to do in the medical profession. And then the other thing is drugs. It's an extremely profitable industry. As a matter of fact, the AMA was founded to support patent medicine and to eliminate the country of these drugless healers. That's what the AMA was first, the principles of the AMA, why it was first founded. So, you know, the Food and Drug Administration also, you know, they're supposed to approve, you know, so they're supposed to monitor and improve the safety of drugs, and they try, and I think there's probably some good people in the FDA, but I think there's a lot of politics involved. A lot of FDA employees end up working for pharmaceutical companies after they do their stint in the FDA. This is common knowledge. I mean, most people know this, and it's corrupt. So FDA doesn't really protect us from toxins. They don't really tell us the true story about how dangerous some drugs are, and you know, together, I mean, the profit motive is driving the industry, and I'm more concerned about our health. So who should really be in control is you. You're your own ultimate insurance policy, and I support in my book that we should look at all different kinds of healthcare practitioners, that there's all these different philosophies, and none of them are wrong. There's not a good one and a bad one. They're all different in the way they look at a human being and the way they approach healing. And if we use them wisely, if we're in control of this, we can look at, okay, I've got these set of symptoms, and I think this set of symptoms fits the Oriental medical philosophy better than it does the allopathic. So I'm going to go to an Oriental medical doctor for this. And, you know, so and then when you do go to the healthcare practitioner that you choose, take the time and make sure they take the time with you to understand what they think your problem is, that you understand what they're calling their diagnosis. Because many times we submit to treatment and we're not really paying attention. We just let them treat us. We put ourselves in their hands. We need to understand what they're saying is wrong with us. And then, you know, you might say, I don't agree with that. I'm going to get another opinion from a different kind of professional. We ought to know what our alternatives are. So we try to get a definitive diagnosis from whoever we see. We try to understand that diagnosis, and then we look for alternatives. How many choices do we have to treat this? When you can do that, you'll be in control of your health care. So how to get there, diet and exercise is the most important thing you can do for your health, is to have a healthy, organic diet and to move your body. Most illnesses will be better if you can do that. But that's not the only thing. You can't ignore healthcare treatment. So having somebody that you can work with to do routine examinations and kind of keep up with you, it's if you can find a doctor that you can work with who'll just kind of monitor your health, it's a treasure to have. And most important, and I'm going to be emphasizing this a lot, maintain your own records. Don't trust somebody else, even if it's a really good doctor, to be managing your records for you. You need to have your own chart. And you should have every note that any doctor has written on you and every lab test that they have done, the original lab tests, and any procedures that they've done. You should have a copy of that yourself. You should make your own chart. And I think it's absolutely vital that you have that. The more complex that medical treatment gets, the more important it is that you're the central, you're the central source of that data on yourself. Because you might be the first person to pick up on something that's changed, where other doctors, they're just busy doing their practice. They're not paying attention to that shift in a blood level or something like that. And then actively participating in decision making. That doesn't mean you're a compliant patient. That's a non-compliant patient. But insisting that you want to know why they're prescribing this, you know, why are they, you know, what's their differential diagnosis? You learn what that means. What's a differential diagnosis? It's all the possible things that your symptoms could be. You know, ask for that. So I want to know what your differential is. I want to know why you're picking this thing to treat first, and what makes you think that's the highest likelihood. And that you ask these questions. You don't let the guy or woman get out of there until they give you answers. And if you can't get answers from them, you look them up on the internet. So I talked about the Bill of Rights for Health Care. This became law in 2003, and it's the basis of the HIPAA law, and you're legally entitled to have information disclosed to you. So what does that mean? Does that mean now that this is law that you walk into a doctor's office and you get a ton of information? No, you have to demand it. You really do. You should be offered a choice of providers and plans for insurance. Okay, we do have a lot of choice, don't we? Almost half the nation is uninsured. That's our worst choice. So you should have access to emergency services, whether you have the ability to pay or not. You should be participating in treatment decisions. You should be treated with respect and non-discrimination. And your health information should be completely confidential. That's a joke. Your health information is not confidential. And so one of the other things that I really emphasize in my book is that you should look at the consents that you sign. You should read every word, and you should cross out anything you don't agree with. Because basically, especially from insurance companies, those releases of information give them the right to talk to your employer, to look at your bank account, to look at your tax returns, to talk to any doctor they want to talk to. You sign that thing, you're a fool to sign that thing. They can talk to your neighbors. I mean, I read through one. I went, I can't believe this. They can know what your checking account has in it. I go, they don't need this. So you shouldn't sign any consent to release information without reading it thoroughly. And I have downloadable forms for limitation on forms that you can use and you can download them. I'll give you the website. You can do it free even without buying my book. But you should always review and make up your own consent forms when doctors, here's what I consent to, here's who should not have my chart, here's the information it's okay to give to an insurance company, here's what I don't want you to give to an insurance company, and that you have those forms and you're in charge of that. So that's not the same thing as what HIPAA gives you the right to, but you can, HIPAA law does give you the right to change your consent form, to have your own consent form. Doctor might not like it. So you also have the right to complain and to appeal. That doesn't mean you're going to get what you want. So Renegade patients are healthy skeptics. You're skeptical. I encourage you to be skeptical of anything that's told to you, that you check it out. Even if you really trust this doctor, like if you come and see me and you really feel like you trust me, please check out what I told you. I could be wrong. I could be dead wrong. You know, I've learned more from my patients than I learned in medical school. So I try not to be wrong, but you should always investigate anything you're told. You should investigate any drug you're prescribed. You should understand the philosophy of the provider that you're seeing. You should understand, how do they look at the human body? How do they look at illness? How do they look at treating conditions? If you can't find it out from them, you know, look up their licensing and see what they're taught. Then you can ask them, is this what you buy into? So in my book, I write about all the different kind of healthcare providers and what their licensing is like and what the philosophy of treatment is like and how they view the human body and how they view treatment, so that you kind of get an idea of what you're getting when you go to different kinds of providers. You should always look at, you know, choice A, choice B, choice C, and then make your own decision. So this is just an example. They say you shouldn't trust anecdotal information, and we shouldn't. We should have double-blind, placebo-controlled studies before we do anything. So prior to, in 1794, Alexander Gordon thought it might be a good idea for healthcare providers to wash their hands before they put them inside of a woman's vagina when she's about to give birth, because a lot of women were dying from puerperal fever, which was, you know, it was an infection. We didn't know what germs were at that time, but this guy, Alexander Gordon, just thought it might be a good idea. He had no proof. He just kind of published this article, circulated it around, and nobody paid any attention to it. And after, you know, in the early 1800s, hospitals were starting to be built, and doctors, you know, were becoming specialists, and they were trying to push midwives out of the birthing process, although midwives traditionally always washed their hands and used hot water and hot wet towels when they delivered, and that wasn't how doctors did it in hospitals. As a matter of fact, in teaching hospitals, the interns would go practice pelvic exams with their bare hands on cadavers, and then they'd go examine women who are in labor. So puerperal fever was really common in hospitals in the early 1800s. Dr. Semmelweis, yes, Semmelweis, you got it. Dr. Semmelweis did a study. He thought there was a relationship between, he thought that in these hospitals where they were using cadavers to practice, they had much higher rates of puerperal fever. So when he became the head of a surgery department, he had 2 surgical rooms, and one, nobody could enter that room without washing their hands in a chlorine solution. No one was allowed in that room without doing that. And the other, you know, they could do what they usually did. And doctors were very offended that he was even doing this study. They were insulted. Well, he showed that the incidence of puerperal fever in the women and the people that were operated on in the chlorine solution room was 90% lower than in the other operating rooms. And he lost his job. Nobody took it seriously. It wasn't a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. So he ended up dying of puerperal fever himself because he got a cut on his finger, you know, no sterile technique, and he died, ironically, of that. But after he died, in 1885, Louis Pasteur published, he discovered the bacteria that caused puerperal fever. And so he published his study, and then doctors started to take it a little more seriously. But it was very slow before they really made this change. Now, from 1794 to 1885, how many people do you think died from puerperal fever? Yeah, I really don't know, but many, many, many people died. Now, there was a rumor in New York City where there was public hospitals and private hospitals and midwives at the time, that there were some hospitals that were really high on puerperal fever, and women knew, you know, women gossiped among themselves and said, don't go to that hospital. This is anecdotal information. And so they spread the word. This is a dangerous hospital. This is a safe hospital. You know, these midwives are safe. These ones aren't. They were just passing around anecdotal information. And so in New York, they noticed that there were fewer women getting puerperal fever in the general population. Well, it was just gossip that got that word around of what to watch out for. They didn't know that it was because some hospitals used asepsis and some didn't. They had no idea. They just knew who came out in a box and who came out with their baby. You know, they didn't know why. So anecdotal information can be very useful, but you got to use your own reasoning when you look at that. But it's very important. Now, in the future, we may scoff at the things we accept as common practice today. I think we will be, yeah. So many drugs, many prescription drugs produce side effects that are worse than the illness they were meant to treat. In FDA-approved studies, it is considered acceptable for a certain number of people to die or have disability as a result of taking a drug in a study. It's considered an acceptable risk. Now, if that's you or your loved one that died, I mean, the best example I can think of is Vioxx. Over 20, how many people was it?
80 to 140,000.
80 to 140,000 people died of heart attacks because of taking Vioxx, not for any other reason. It was removed from the market, but there has been research that hasn't made the headlines that Celebrex and Bextra aren't far behind. They cause a lot of heart attacks. They're still on the market. They're still available. Why? Vioxx is trying to get back on the market. Well, they just made it a little harder to get, you know. And the myth is that Celebrex and Bextra are so much better on the stomach. That turns out that that's not true. Only a small percentage of people have less stomach problems with Celebrex or Bextra than they do with the other anti-inflammatory drugs. As a psychiatrist, I can tell you that SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, when Prozac first came on the market, I noticed in my practice that some patients got worse on SSRIs, that some patients got enraged, some got more depressed, even suicidal. I can remember one patient as clear as day. She was afraid to stop the antidepressant because if she got any worse, she knew she'd kill herself. And I was trying to tell her, you know, you seem to have gotten worse since you started this drug. I think we should try to get off of it. She said, I'm afraid to get off of it. So I said, well, then let's increase the dose, but I want you to call me every day. So we tried, and she got worse and worse, and finally she stopped it. She was one of the first people to join the class action suit against Lilly for misrepresentation of Prozac. But all the SSRIs, now the culture is to say that adolescents and children, they're the only ones that might have this side effect. That's not true. That is not true. But children and adolescents don't always talk about feeling worse. They figure, well, the guy gave me a pill, and now I feel worse, and, screw him. And they feel worse and worse. So they don't talk about it, and a child doesn't know how to talk about being more depressed. But, adults do talk about it. But it's really common. Maybe 1 in 50, that's my personal opinion, that actually feel worse. That's a lot. That shouldn't be hidden, but it is hidden. So because we're acculturated and the industry is acculturated, think of pills as cures, this continues and this information is hidden. There's a lot of drugs that are problematic. Do people know about Fosamax? Have you heard about the jaw necrosis that was uncovered about Fosamax? Well, Fosamax it's a bisphosphonate. It's given routinely to anybody who's even got slight bone loss now. It's a very, very profitable drug. And when I heard the mechanism of action, I thought, this doesn't make much sense. It's basically like sandbagging your bones. It incorporates calcium in your bones, but just like loosely. It doesn't actually increase bone metrics. It increases your bone density on an X-ray, but it's not any, and they compare themselves to estrogen and progesterone. They're as good as estrogen and progesterone in preventing fractures. Why don't we use estrogen and progesterone? Come on. But it started to come out that some people that had dental procedures, their whole jaw was like they put in an implant and the whole jaw would just rot. And dentists, periodontists, they look at Fosamax and they call it Fossy jaw. The people that have, we're not going to even do any dental procedures on someone who's been on Fosamax. so the people in the dental profession know this well. They're not talking to us. They're not announcing it to the public. We don't know about this. Well, when that information first came out about Fosamax, the people that make Fosamax, I don't know what company it is, but they said, oh, no, that's very rare. It hardly ever happens, and it's just the people that are on IV Fosamax. It's common. It's very common. So now, in the instructions on Fosamax, it says that if you are going to, before you start Fosamax, if you're contemplating dental procedures, you should have them done before you start on Fosamax. That's all that's all there is. That's all the information you get about how dangerous it is. So that's why I'm kind of down on synthetic substances. I think that there's a lot of risks and a lot of side effects. To get a patent, this product has to not exist in nature, because you can't patent something that exists in nature. So it means it's from another planet? I don't know. It's alien to our bodies. Now that doesn't mean there aren't some prescription drugs that are phenomenal. There are some. But we rely way too much on these substances. If we use nutraceutical remedies, my thought is they have the same organic basis as all living things. Now there's some herbs that are poison. They're completely toxic to us. Well, we can't just take them indiscriminately. But what they have in favor, what they have going for them, is that they're like us. They're carbon-based, animals and plants, and some of them are produced in our body, and some of them are essential to our body's functioning. So, like, if a nutraceutical product will treat your condition, why not use that first? That's how I came to believe. I do prescribe prescription drugs. It's not that I don't, but I'll use natural products first. When I use hormones, I like to use hormones that are exactly like our body makes. I mean, we have a hard enough time sometimes processing the things that are identical to our bodies. I mean, put in something that's alien, we might not have the enzymes to turn it into we might turn it into a toxic substance, or not get rid of it, or that's why a lot of side effects happen. So a lot of why don't other doctors feel that way? Why don't other doctors feel like I do? Well, there's the standard of care. The standard of care should be in all capital letters. It runs our lives. If we're not practicing according to the standard of care of the community, we can lose our license. That's the truth. Somebody could sue me because I'm not prescribing, Prilosec for your gastric acid problem, or serotonin for your depression, and and non-steroidal anti-inflammatories if you have pain, because this is the standard of care in the community. So doctors fear lawsuits. And the insurance company, if you don't practice according to the standard of care, you won't get paid. You'll lose your contract. So we all have good sense. You guys are smart, sensible people. You can really make your own choices. You can make your own decisions if you have enough information. So, but you can be influenced by programming and advertising and the culture. I know that, I wrote this book. I probably needed to teach. I taught what I need to learn. I get intimidated by doctors. I'll go in and they'll be rushed, and they'll be bossy, and I'll forget to ask the question I wanted to ask, and then they don't return my phone call, and and I'm left without the information, and I feel frustrated and intimidated, and I'm a doctor. Why am I letting this happen to me? I wrote a book about it. But I think you have to practice. And another thing that I've encouraged people to do is to bring an advocate with you. You don't have to hire someone. Bring a friend and say, I want this information from this doctor, and don't let me leave until I get it. Because I might get worried or distracted or confused or intimidated. If you come with me, you can help me make sure that these are the questions I get answered. Having an advocate with you is a great idea. So the philosophy of action to be a Renegade patient is to use the full spectrum of alternative medicine, to use it as a strategy, use all the different alternatives as a strategy for your own health plan, teach patients and doctors to be partners with each other, find doctors that aren't intimidated by your intelligence and that you did a little studying, and choose the right approach for each health issue. So there's, complementary alternative medicine, that's CAM. It encompasses more than 27 different therapy types. I've listed a few here: acupuncture, Ayurvedic medicine, homeopathy, chiropractic therapy, massage therapy, which I do think is is a health, you think, well, massage therapists, they aren't healthcare practitioners. Massage therapists can do a lot for your health. Megavitamin therapy or orthomolecular therapy, Chinese medicine, Western herbalism, aromatherapy, and mind-body approaches. So, using all of them as appropriate gives you the most complete health care. So, I think I have said this, haven't I? So when we look at a double-blind, placebo-controlled study, that's what conventional medicines have to go through to get approval. The placebo group has a less robust response than the drug group to, some particular symptom. And that's how they get FDA approval. They're better than placebo at treating a condition. This is a very effective way to prove that a drug does what it says it can do. However, the statistic can be manipulated, and they are manipulated. And the problem is that the studies, who they choose to be in the studies in order to limit the variables, are people that are nothing like you and me. I don't know where they get these people, but they can't have any other illnesses. They can't be on any other drugs. They have to have just this one symptom and not any other symptoms. And so to qualify, if you've ever tried, say, gee, this is a new drug for this condition that I've got, I'm going to try and get into this study group, and you go, gosh, I took an aspirin once, I guess I can't be in this group. So they're nothing like any of my patients, the people that are in these studies. So that makes me wonder, about the results. How valid are they for the common person that might have a lot of things going on? No two patients are the same. I'm not anything like you, even if I've got the same symptoms. It could be for different reasons. So you need to work with somebody. You need to understand this yourself, that your concerns and symptoms are unique. They're unique. You have your own internal environment and external environment that you live in. The doctor that you're working with has the training that he or she has that has them have a belief system about you and about your illness, and then they have their clinical experience to rely on, and then the research that they read, whether it's basic science or pharmaceutical research or the latest commercial, but it's an interaction of all these things that comes up with a treatment. So the doctor and patient need to work as a team. Many people still believe that doctors never make mistakes. Many people I've talked to are, they really think they have to obey doctor's orders. Probably none of you guys have ever felt that way. You guys are renegades already. But pharmaceutical insurance companies who determine the standard of care and determine the quality of care you have limit what doctors can do. Their goal is profit. They want to make money. And so the standard of care changes as new drugs come out and as new insurance schemes hit the market. So the standard of care isn't really a high standard that we should try to uphold. It's politics. The insurer wants to keep the costs low. So when you get you go to a doctor and then you get an explanation of benefits, and the paper says, you saved this amount of money because we paid your doctor this, and you don't owe him anything else. You go, wow, I saved all this money. Isn't that great? You didn't save that money. That's the money they kept. They didn't give it to the doctor, and they kept it from your premium. And, health insurance industry is one of the most profitable industries in the world. Last year, they had $12 billion in profits. The 4 major health insurance companies in the United States had $12 billion in profits, while many hospitals and doctors are going bankrupt. So the pharmaceutical company wants to maintain an exclusive monopoly through patents. So sometimes when their patent is going to run out, like Imitrex, a migraine medication, in the next 3 months it's going to go generic. They charge $27 a pill for an Imitrex, and if you've ever had a migraine, you'll pay it, because a migraine's pretty bad. Now it's going to go generic, so it's going to get dirt cheap. Well, they've come out with a new drug called Treximet, and they've got research showing it's superior to Imitrex. What's Treximet? It's naltrexone, a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, plus 85 milligrams of Imitrex. It's got a new patent. That's what they're promoting now. You could take that yourself. So when you see Treximet ads and how superior they are to all other migraine medications, just keep that in mind. So the bottom line is that there's this bind. Now I really do feel for doctors that are in this bind, because they end up thinking that their choice is between going bankrupt or complying if they're in managed care plans, or doing a disservice to the patient. And too many of them choose to do a disservice to the patient, and they're exchanging it for their own survival. So most practices are struggling to stay open due to their compliance issues with insurance companies, and most patients feel their concerns aren't heard. So it's a really tough situation. So if a doctor gives you orders, and should you obey or defy them? I mean, you went to the doctor. A lot of the, why aren't we just, what's this obey business? What's this doctor's orders business? It's common in our culture. In fact, there's many times I've gone to medical conferences and they talk about patient compliance. There's going to be at least 1 or 2 lectures at any medical conference about patient compliance. It's how to get you guys to obey better, to take the drugs we prescribe so we can sell them. And I even got a great letter from prescribersletter.com. They sent me a little note about how I can stop you from asking more than 2 questions in a visit. I mean, it's really kind of sad. So what we need to do is learn how to find doctors to work with, take control of the consult, and get the health care we need. And sometimes it means really fighting for your rights. I'm going to skip some of these. So there, not very many people raise their hands as healthcare practitioners. I do have some advice for doctors on how to make your practice more patient-oriented and less run by insurance companies. And I won't go into that detail now, but I have a questionnaire for physicians to answer to say, is doing your practice this way, are you happy? Are you stressed out? Are you making any money? Are you really serving? Are you compromising your ethics? And what they should do about it. I'm going to skip some of these, and because I find I just go yada yada yada, and I've already said all this stuff. So to start, I'd say you monitor. When you're creating your own chart, you should be monitoring your own diet. What do you eat? What do you take for nutrients? What lifestyle issues do you have? What kind of stresses do you have? What medications are you taking? You should be taking, keeping records like that for yourself, and then noticing what changes over time, what kind of things are helping you and what kind of things aren't. This is about how many people die from going to the hospital. A lot. Actually, it says here between 2000 and 2002, 195,000 people died from preventable hospital errors. An additional 100,000 died from hospital-acquired infections. That number is a gross underestimation, because when a person goes into the hospital and they die from a hospital-acquired infection, they usually put as the cause of death the reason they came in the hospital, not that they got a hospital-acquired infection. So say a person came in with a broken leg, and then they got a pulmonary embolism, and then they got an infection, and died from that. They won't say that. They'll just say fractured hip and pulmonary embolism. So it's pretty dangerous to go to a hospital. 2 weeks ago in the New York Times, I saw an article that said there's been 600 complaints about nutritional supplements received by the FDA this year. And you didn't see until the end of the article that compares to over 400,000 complaints about prescription drugs and over-the-counter drugs. That's not so bad then, I guess. So, have you ever gone to a doctor and you had to take time off from work and make time for this appointment and prepare for this appointment, and then he nods his head a couple times, does a blood test, and says there's nothing wrong with you? I just think that is one of the most insulting things that a physician can say to a person who's spent their time and money to come and see them and be told there's nothing wrong with you. So you need to fight that. Most of the time, it's heard by patients that have subtle symptoms or chronic symptoms or subjective symptoms, like there isn't a test that can prove it. Those symptoms are real. Symptoms that don't have a clear pharmaceutical remedy. If there isn't a drug they can prescribe. So one patient, I have a lot of patient stories in my book, but there's one woman, she had a bypass, she had a stent, she still had angina. I did a blood test on her and her Lp(a), it's a type of LDL that's very inflammatory. It's supposed to be less than 10, it was 270. So I called her cardiologist and I said, do you know her Lp(a) is 270? And he said, I'm not concerned about that. I said, why not? I mean, she's still got angina, she's still really sick. And he said, because there's no drug that treats it. No drug that treats it. So I sent her to get IV vitamin C therapy, and in 6 weeks, her Lp(a) was 27. So I called up the cardiologist, and I told him about that. And he said, well, there's no proof that that's effective. Didn't I just prove it? Sad, it's really sad. So, your own chart. You had the HIPAA law gives you the right to review your patient records anytime you want. You can go see a doctor, and while he's taking notes, you can say, I'd like to look at the notes you just took. He might say no, but he's not allowed to do that. You can say, according to HIPAA law, I can read those, and I can have copies of those notes. And you should get copies of those notes. You should know what's being written down. I've got so many horror stories about people. This one woman, just tell you a short one, she was, I sent her to a dermatologist for a rash or a pimple or something, and she was titrating off of Valium. She had had a very difficult divorce, and she was on Valium, and that was over, and now we were titrating off of it. And so she just mentioned that to her dermatologist, and he wrote Valium addict. A couple of years later, she was applying for life insurance, and she was turned down flat, and she had no idea why, because she's a very healthy person. And so he said, well, it was your records. So she got all her records, and she saw this Valium addict thing written by a dermatologist, and she said, I'm not a Valium addict. I've never been a Valium addict. Where did you get that idea? You need to take that out of the chart. And he refused to. That was before HIPAA. Now, they should take it out, and if they refuse, you have the right to put in a statement that will be a permanent part of that record, or you can close that record. You can say, you can never release this chart to anybody, even insurance companies, other physicians. I mean, that's another alternative that you have. But so limiting the right of access to that chart if the doctor won't change it, or getting them to change it because it's not true. And you should do that. You should keep a close eye on it. So, so when you're making your own chart, you should get all the information you can from every doctor, have the chart divided up into your medical history that you make out yourself, your current and past medications and how they worked or didn't work for you, because later you'll forget. You'll forget that you took this drug and had this side effect. So keeping that record is really important, because it'll be shredded in 5 years from whoever gave you that drug. They won't have that information anymore. So laboratory procedures and reports, you should get the original copy. Kaiser's got a practice now of giving you your lab results. That's really wonderful. They give you your lab results, and they say that they don't give you the reference range. They just tell you it's normal. But their reference ranges are pretty weird. I had one man who had a total testosterone level of 220, and they told him it was normal because their range was 210 to 600. Now 220 is really, really low. Poor man had osteoporosis because his testosterone was so low, but it got missed by Kaiser because of their reference ranges. So you should get the original lab tests, any consultations or recommendations that have been made, any research that you do, keep a section in your chart of your own research, and then any health-related articles that you might want to share with your doctor. Keep all of that in your chart. And then take that chart with you when you go see a consultant. Then you won't have that experience of seeing a doctor, and then he says, well, I need to get your labs from another doctor, so I'll see you next month. I waited 2 months for this appointment. Well, I don't have your records. I have to have them. So if you have your records with you, that's not going to happen to you. Also, keeping track of your visits. Now, there's something that every doctor learns when they go to medical school. It's called the SOAP format. SOAP stands for subjective, objective, assessment, and plan. Now, even if a doctor doesn't write notes like that, that's how they think. They want to hear what your complaint is. Then they'll want to have some kind of proof. It might, objective things are like your blood pressure, your temperature, your weight, any laboratory test results, any symptoms that they observe. That's the objective. Assessment is all the possible causes. And a lot of times doctors will be sloppy and they'll just write one thing. And so when you're working with a doctor and you're doing your own SOAP note, you can say, what's your assessment? Okay, what's your differential diagnosis? So they say, you've got migraines. Say, well, what's your differential? And he goes, why do you need to know that? You do need to know that. You want to know what other possible things it could be in order of likelihood. So you should ask for a differential and then ask for a plan. Now, a plan is, what else am I going to do? What testing am I going to do? Or what treatment am I going to prescribe? So there should be alternative treatments on there, and you should have access to that. So if you do notes too, if you do a subjective, objective assessment plan, you can start the progress note before you see the doctor. I've got these downloadable SOAP notes that you can just fill in when you go see a doctor. Write your subjective, write your objective. You've got objective information too. You might have been taking your blood pressure for a couple weeks, and and it's changed, and so you put that down, and then you might put your best guess, or just let them fill that in, and then if they won't work with your SOAP note, then you just write down everything that they say, and then ask for their notes when they're done. Also, correcting your chart. For the same reason you should maintain your records, you should be looking at what's in that chart, because many times I've seen people have horrible consequences from misinformation being written down. I've made mistakes sometimes, and I try to be very conscientious, but I might not have been listening that well, and I wrote the wrong information down. It wasn't what they actually said. So you should review it and correct it before something bad happens, like you lose your life insurance. So many consent forms don't have an expiration date. You should put an expiration date on it. This consent expires in 2 months, 1 month, 1 year, whatever you decide is right. You should be governing the terms of the release. And there might be some people you don't ever want to have access to your charts. And so you might put those people down. My ex-husband, whatever. Oh, this thing here, biomedpublishers.com/Rinker-forms. You can get all the downloadable forms that are in the book for free. So having a customized release, you can require, what I tell people, my practice in my office is that anytime anybody asks for any of my patients' records, I always call the patient. Even if I have a signed consent, because a lot of times people sign consents and they make 100 copies of it, and 2 years later they're asking for information and the patient doesn't even know. So I say, so-and-so wants a copy of your chart. Did you know they were requesting your chart? No. Well, I'm not going to release your chart until you come in here and read it, because you don't know what I wrote. And so there might be some information that's in there that you really don't want them to have. So I have them sit down and read their chart, if they want it released, and put little sticky notes on things that they don't want to send. Bruce used to work for me. He knows I do that. And then when we make a copy, we white out the areas, we block them out when we make a copy of the notes. And sometimes I've had lawyers or insurance companies say, what's this blocked out stuff? And I said, that's information, that might be information about other people that and to protect their privacy, I whited out, I might be a lie, but I'll say that. It might be that, it might be this, it might be that, but it's not relevant to the question you were asking, so it was deleted. And I've never had anybody take me to task on that. I think that you have a right to that, to restricting the information. Forms you can get online, they're free. Fill them out. They usually have to be notarized or signed by another witness. But it's saying so-and-so can make decisions for me if I am unable to do that myself. But I think advocates should be used more broadly than that. I think that especially, if you know that you get confused or anxious when you go see a specialist, or you're going to go see somebody about something you're really worried about, have a friend be your advocate. Discuss with them the things you want to get out of a consultation, and then have them be with you to make sure that you get everything you want, all your questions answered. And my friend can be more proactive on my behalf than I can for myself if I'm worried or frightened or distracted because I'm sick. So I think we should use advocates a lot more. You can use advocates to get your insurance reimbursement. There's one person I interviewed for my book, healthcareadvocates.com. there's a membership of $15 a year, and sometimes you're trying to get reimbursed for a couple $1,000s. It might cost $40 to have them do it for you. The only thing you have to be careful of with advocate companies, professional advocates, is that some of them work for insurance companies. They don't have to say that unless you ask. So you have to ask, do you have any contracts with any health insurance companies? Because that's not who you want to represent you to try to get reimbursed, because you won't get reimbursed. So, but there's many private advocates that are really proactive in helping you find a nursing facility, helping you get reimbursed, helping you find the right kind of specialist. They do all kinds of things like that. So when you're interacting with a doctor, use the doctor's staff, and the doctor should be using their staff too. This is talking about doctors, that they should ask their staff, do any of the patients have complaints about me or about the time or about the information given, so that a doctor can have a better rapport with their patients. But for you, if you should let the staff know, especially if the doctor doesn't give you the time to talk, what you didn't like about that visit or what you didn't get, because they should find that out. Sometimes the doctor doesn't realize that they're being brusque or they're not being informative, and they might improve. You don't assume that they know how you feel. You should communicate it. And then if they don't change, switch doctors. So I'm not going to go into that right now. When you're looking for finding the right kind of doctor, you should learn about the different philosophies of medicine. So I would take the time to do that. I'm not going to go into that now because you'll all fall asleep. But learning, thinking about what kind of medical issues you want to resolve or prevent, what's your preference in terms of what kind of things you're willing to take in terms of remedies, and then go to the kind of doctors that prescribe those kind of things or think like you want them to think. So, kind of be careful about choosing what you want for each different situation. A lot of times people will just accept what their insurance company tells them to do because they think they can't afford good quality health care. So as long as we believe that, insurance companies are going to keep lowering the amount of money that's paid to doctors and keep limiting the access to the health care that you have. So you really got to think in terms of maybe, in this financial crisis, it's kind of hard to say this, but having a health savings account, or certain money that, I know some people that spend more money on shoes than they're willing to spend on themselves for their health. But I also know that it's hard to make a living around here, and it's hard, some things are very expensive, but you can sometimes negotiate with doctors. There's some various kinds of medical schools, Ayurvedic medical schools, Oriental medical schools, where they have clinics attached to the school, and you can get very low-cost health care there based on your ability to pay. So I wouldn't eliminate that either, because they're all supervised by by more experienced doctors. So it's your choice to become an empowered, healthy individual or remain passive and without options. Thank you. Yes.
Have you had much experience with directives as an alternative to advocates, and would you contrast them at all?
Directives.
Writing down choices and preferences about
in advance. And have it be just yourself and not an advocate doing it for you.
Or even having a directive with an advocate.
If you can anticipate the kind of healthcare problems you're going to have, like say you've been diagnosed with cancer, and you know what things you will not accept, what kind of things you will, you can write those things down, and you can sign it, and that's a legal document. And you can give that to any doctor you work with, and he's supposed to honor that document. You don't have to have it notarized or anything like that, but it is good to have someone else, speak for you that knows what you want and knows what's on that document, so that if you end up being confused or there's an emergency or you're unconscious, that they're not going to slip in that treatment that you don't want, that your advocate is there, and that you have a secondary advocate too. Most of those forms for durable power of attorney have you cite an alternate so that you're not without somebody to speak for you. Yes?
I'd like to comment on that. High-powered attorney had mentioned that treatment. They always ask you to sign the durable power of attorney there. I was told that unless you carry your own personal durable power of attorney, the one you sign there supersedes your individual choices.
That's true. That's true. Because, and one of the reasons they do that is because if you should become unconscious during that emergency room visit, they want to have the right to do what they think is best for you. So it might be a good idea to have it with you. Or before you sign it, say, I'll sign this, but then you add your own writing, you must get this person's consent unless I'm about to die. You know, and you can add anything you want to any consent form. The doctor might say, I'm not going to treat you now that you've done this, and then you say, okay, I'm going to go someplace else. You know, but you can add anything you want to a consent form and cross out anything you want. Yes?
You know, some of the older antibiotics are better or not any different than the new ones that cost 10 times as much.
That's right.
Don't we have a right to say to the doctor, I don't want that new drug, I want the old one?
Of course you do. Of course you do.
If they give you a choice.
Well, legally they're required to listen to what you want. Now, he might say, I've got statistics that show that the particular infection you have is resistant to that bacteria that you want and that you want to have treated. So, I mean, you might want to listen to what they have to say. But it is true that doctors are kind of brainwashed to use the most recent patented drug. They got samples in their office. Hey, I can give this to you for free. You know, I can give you the first week for free. And your insurance will cover it. Don't worry about it. But you know, we're creating superbugs in this world that are going to wipe us off the planet, you know, by getting stronger and stronger antibiotics. And some of the older ones that haven't been used as much end up working just as well because they haven't been in use. There was somebody, yes.
Yes, when you talk about renegade patients, can you be this way on an HMO and still get what you want, or is this in reference for if you're on a...
No, I really encourage people in HMOs like the big K to make a real pest of yourself. You know, if you're not getting what you want, I mean, threaten to sue, carry on, be a real pain in the butt, because then it's a squeaky wheel, he gets the grease. People that are the most vociferous about, you know, I demand to see a specialist, I demand to, you know, I have a right, I know what my rights are, I'm going to report you to HIPAA. I mean, HIPAA's not that powerful, the truth is, but doctors are really scared of HIPAA, because if HIPAA does investigate your office and you haven't listened to the patient, or you haven't acted responsibly or honored their privacy, or, you know, complied with the rules, you can be fined thousands of dollars. So, I mean, we've been taught that HIPAA does decide to investigate a doctor. It can be a very ugly thing. So, while they don't do it very often, if you threaten, I'm going to report you to HIPAA because I have a right to this. I have a right to a second opinion. You do have a right to a second opinion. You know, you'll probably get it.
The reason I ask is my doctor is always telling me I need to go get a mammogram, and I won't get a mammogram. I don't really feel that safe. I tell her I get a thermograph or an ultrasound, but she said to me, "What's a thermograph?" Pretending, you know, she doesn't know what that is.
So, you know, the law does say that if your HMO does not provide an alternative to, you know, the alternative that you want, if they don't provide it, they're supposed to pay for it. If they don't have somebody who does it in their HMO, they're supposed to pay for somebody to do it outside of the HMO.
Now here's another thing too. If they discover through all this, say for instance that I have breast cancer, they're going to push me to go through their cut and slash and chemo and radiation, and that's not something I want to do. Maybe I want to go to a different practitioner that practices something else. Are they going to put the stops on the other alternative practitioners? Or make it
They can't stop you from getting any health care that you choose to pay for.
Okay, so they won't pay for that.
Yeah, they might not pay for it, but and you might have a good case, especially if the treatment that you want has been shown to be effective, in research, you might have a case and you might need an advocate, a legal advocate, to get your reimbursement after you do the treatment, but they can't stop you from getting a treatment that you want to get. Yes?
Would you please repeat what you said about an insurance company doesn't offer? Would you please repeat what you said if an insurance company doesn't offer an alternative to a certain test they have to pay for it?
Actually, not an insurance company. If you're a member of an HMO, and there's a treatment, there's a treatment that's also considered a standard of care. Like say the one example that I read about was this woman who had breast cancer and she had a breast removed and it was pretty disfiguring. It was a pretty total mastectomy, and she wanted her breast rebuilt. But this insurance plan, the members in this insurance plan there was 2 kinds of procedures, and she researched both kinds of procedures, and she decided that the one that would work best for her was called the DEP procedure. And so when she went to consult with the plastic surgeon, it was covered by her health plan to have reconstructive surgery after breast cancer. But he said, I'm going to do this procedure. And she said, why not the DEP? And he said, because your plan won't pay for that. And he didn't do it. He didn't do the DEP. So she, it turned out that because nobody on her insurance plan, that they didn't have any contracted providers that did that procedure, and it was a legitimate procedure, they had to pay for somebody outside the network. Legally, they have to pay. Now, you might have to fight to get it, but that's the law. I don't know. Does anybody know if thermography is FDA approved? Did somebody answer?
Call in Saputo, he'll tell you.
Okay. So I don't know the answer to that. I think it's a valid form of, I think it's better than a mammogram myself, but I don't know if it's approved or not. Yes?
Does that hold for a diagnostic procedure? The reason I ask is they, after having seen an oncologist at the new Santa Clara facility, in the hopes that she would have him mention hormone blockade for treatment of prostate cancer is an option. That's better than the 2 oncologists and half a dozen urologists they said that have said, no way, there's surgery or radiation, period. I said, no, I want door number 3, thank you. And I keep shopping once. And so now, since I have an appointment early next week in LA with a guy who will do a colored Doppler, which maps your guts with respect to where is this stuff. And I found out they don't do it. They're only very few do it. And they also don't do like they told me in the MRI section, they don't do an MRI with spectroscopy. So they don't even do that either. So if they don't provide those and I want them, then they have to kick in.
If it's a scan.
That'll save me $450. I'm going to take it.
So if there's research showing that this is a legitimate standard of care, so you can find out, and using an advocate, using professional advocates, and it's not that expensive to use professional advocates. They can help you get reimbursement. But yeah, if it's a legitimate treatment, just because it's more expensive or it's not, and usually that's the reason they won't approve it, it's more expensive. But if it's a legitimate treatment that's recognized in the medical community.
Diagnostic tool. He was one.
Yeah.
Duke Bond was one of the speakers at a conference in LA I went to a month ago, and they had a dozen world-class guys who were.
So you might have to fight to get it reimbursed, but it's worth the fight because you'll feel much safer with that.
That's what member services told me yesterday. If they don't go for it, bring it to us.
And if they won't help you, get an advocate to help you because they can cut a lot of strings.
I asked them, and their office told me when I made the appointment weeks ago that one person fought Kaiser like hell and finally got paid.
Yeah.
So I might be the second one.
You go. Yes.
I was going to recommend Dr. Len Saputo's office, the Health Medicine Center in Walnut Creek, and they do a lot of breast thermography, so he would probably tell you.
Yeah, that's what you said, is Len Saputo would know if it's FDA approved.
He's on the radio tomorrow from 9 to 11 with his wife Vicki on KEST 1450 on your AM dial.
So who was it that wanted to know about thermography if it was FDA? Did you get that? Okay. Yes.
In Switzerland, they do whole body thermography. There's a whole biological medicine network where they actually check the whole body to see years before things develop, not just the breast, but everything is done with whole body thermography.
What's
There's
it?
a woman doing it in Monterey as well, at a place called Holistic Elements, Deb something. She does full body thermography.
If more people had access to a group of folks like you guys that share information and question stuff, it would just be so great. Most people are just, they just feel like victims, and that's why I wrote this book. I wanted them to be like you guys. Anything else? Yes.
Are you familiar with Deborah Davis's book, The Secret War on Cancer?
No. You want to tell us about it?
Well, it's an incredible book. It says the real war on cancer is not for the cure. It's the war against all the things that cause cancer.
Yeah.
All the contaminants and pollution and work-related toxins and so forth. It goes back into the 1800s. But the main thing about this book, it's a commentary on the nature of truth. And she cites one of the examples that stands out in my mind. In 1936, there was a big congress of scientists in Belgium who came from all over the world with proof that smoking caused cancer. And
Really?
1936. And of course the cigarette companies said, oh well, you have to have more proof than that. But there were all kinds of different studies that were done. Everything from soup to nuts, everything from 5 patients to 500 patients and so forth and so on. And this kind of thing has occurred again and again and again. And so it's really, the double-blind placebo test really is not the proper standard of proof.
No, it's not.
But this book is it's a wonderful book, and I highly recommend it to you. It's called The Secret War Against Cancer by Deborah Davis. And when she worked for the Academy of Sciences, she wanted to come out with this book, and she was told, not if you want to work here, you don't. So, anyway, it's a real analysis of the nature of proof.
I think it's, I just get amazed by how efficiently things can be covered up. That they'll be hitting the headlines with some really toxic information. I mean, this stuff about Fosamax and necrosis of the bone was in all the headlines. I mean, it was front page news, and it got covered up so fast, and now nobody's even questioning it. Doctors prescribe it if you've got even slight osteopenia. They'll say, take this Fosamax, and no mention of this necrosis. This just got covered over, and the evidence is just stunning. I mean, you just talk to any periodontist, they'll go, oh my God, Fosamax, all the bisphosphonates, they're horrible. They know. I mean, they've seen what it does directly to the bone. And it's not just this bone, it's all your bones.
I have a two-pronged question. Is it true that the pharmaceuticals weren't allowed to advertise on television until the 90s? And is there an organization that actually is working against pharmaceuticals so they're not allowed to advertise on television?
It's true that they were not allowed to advertise. I don't know when that changed, but you might be right about that in the 1990s. I know now it's, they're, everywhere. They had some rules about, well, you can't mention the specific drug, but now I think they do mention the specific drug. It's just been changing all the time.
Is there anything in pharmaceuticals, like we have MAG, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, is there any organization that can be publicized so people can start to object to it, especially with what they're doing with children advertising pharmaceuticals on Children's Hour TV? That's insanity.
It is insanity. I don't know. Do you know of any organizations to try to stop it?
But I don't think it can be stopped just because the drug companies are now working against the drug discovery window. The number of drug candidates is going down and down and down, and only by increasing the number of candidates.
Or lowering the bar, redefining illness,
Absolutely.
Yeah, your cholesterol should be 90, below 90.
So if you stop them from advertising, the drug industry would suffer hugely.
Yeah. Yes.
In 2002, there was a drug that was discovered by Stevens and his colleagues, Salvados, that actually stops cancer cell like that. It's called Avicen. I've been telling people about it. It's biopharma. Here's the question, the problem was, when I was interviewing them for a project that I was doing at that time with several immunologists, they were given early retirement from their job because of this discovery.
Gee, what a surprise.
They actually told me this, and I know that for
Why, was it natural or cheap or something? It wasn't patented?
Well, they were told that if this gets out to the public, or anybody in...
Then the cancer industry will be destroyed.
No, that their life and their family's health was jeopardized. They were told this. And
Oh, you mean they were threatened?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to kill you if you cure cancer.
Same thing happened to 3 or 4 of my immunologist friends. The same thing. They were given retirement to do another job because they discovered a treatment for this and this and this. And it just goes on. What they told me, and I spoke to the pharmaceutical directly, and the woman came on and finally told me the truth. She said you would destroy a $1 billion industry per day, not a month, per day. You would force 30,000 or more people to retire from a business, plus there's no funding from the public every day on breast cancer. How much money is going in there? There's already a discovery in 2002 on breast cancer called Avicen, 100% effective. You're not going to see that because the money is there, and that's what.
This is why we have to look for these things ourselves. I mean, I know you've been talking a lot about cancer, but there's a number of cancer treatment hospitals, or some of them are in Mexico, where they use, and there's a lot of naturopathic doctors that do cancer treatment that's much more effective and safer and less toxic than what allopathic doctors do. You know, there's just lots of alternatives for cancer treatment. So you just have to look for it. Because I do think it's a self-perpetuating, never concluded industry. So we're done. We're tired. Okay. It's late.
We have.
What your gynecological surgeon recommends, which is surgery. And if so, what type of practitioner might one go to find out?
Oh, wait a minute. Teddy, would you know? Anybody else know? Steve can suggest that, always.
I would look at estrogen dominance as a primary causal mechanism, and so things that would deal with estrogen, like iodine, progesterone supplementation, with or without testosterone, go along with that. Maybe a pharmaceutical intervention might be an aromatase inhibitor drug, which would shut down the synthesis of estrogens.
Do you have Adrian?
If there's an estrogen dominance,
There's an estrogen dominance of the bad estrogens, like and the estradiol component, the 2s, 4s, and 16s. If you have an estrogen dominance of the 16s and you take Helan 951, which is HAELAN 951, it'll change the 16s to the protective 2s. So you may not have to totally reduce your estrogens. It might just more be about the ratio.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, if somebody, like a woman who has estrogen-positive breast cancer, or somebody has a bad estrogen level, the next component is to do something like a urine estrogen metabolism test, and it will break down the 2s, 4s, and 16s in the estradiol. You can take a product like Helan 951, which changes the 16s to the 2s, which the 16s are harmful and the 2s are protective. And I learned about that at the Cancer Control Society conference a few years ago, and became so high on it and shared with so many people that I actually became a distributor because I just believe in the product and I've seen it work. But basically, instead of lowering your estrogens and having so much impact in calcium, heart disease, and all the other stuff, you can just change the ratio, and then we're pretty okay.
you want to try a bottle of Palo 951? She said she sells them.
Did you have a comment on that?
The lady who was the main speaker last month. She's on the website, all the details.
Yeah. Cheryl Selman, yes.
It's not a question, but it's kind of a discovery. Probably a number of you have GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, otherwise known as heartburn and so forth. Well, all over the world, for at least quite a few years, it was thought that there was a tie-in with sinusitis, and that GERD caused sinusitis. But there was one lone researcher saying that there's no basis for this, it's the other way around. Now, if you look at it, I don't know how many of you people here have sinusitis and GERD, but gravitationally speaking, it makes sense that the postnasal drip that is infected goes down in to hit the esophageal sphincter and irritates it so much that it opens up inappropriately and allows gastric acids to come up into the esophagus. So I think this is the wave of the future in understanding GERD. And so how do you control sinusitis? Well, that's a real bugaboo. It's, you know, zillions of people have sinusitis. Well, first of all, I don't want to say that everybody who has GERD has this causality. I would say that a substantial number of people have this, so if you have it, take a look at the process going on in you. Then the other side of this is, what do you do about sinusitis? And it appears to me, from my studies, that gluten sensitivity and or celiac disease could be at the root of many, many cases of sinusitis. And I think that there is a wave of information that's going around in this country now due to the lectureship of a particular doctor who's going around giving big seminars. I went to one, there was about 200 professionals there, and at one point I said, how many different tests are there for gluten sensitivity and or celiac disease? He said, how many people in this room? I said, I don't know, 200. He says, that's about how many tests there are. So if you suspect you have gluten sensitivity and your test runs negative, you may indeed have it as portrayed by another test. So there's more to this if anyone wants to talk to me about after this, because it gets bigger. Okay.
Hi. I would like to speak just a moment to your original question about cysts, and that is Dr. John Lee did a lot of work with progesterone therapy to pull cysts back, so you might want to look at his work. And that, of course, would be taking progesterone to offset. I loved your stuff that you had to say about changing the ratios of the estrogens. That was very interesting. Thank you. With regards to the GERD issue, I'd like to postulate there's another approach to this. It's quite mechanical. I used to see an osteopath who would simply do a very simple procedure right underneath my diaphragm that would release that area, and I would like to advise everyone who's got any issues along those lines at least to check that out, because wouldn't it be a nice simple thing if you just had a little mechanical problem that could be released? And with regards to sinusitis, if you've got sinusitis, look hard for mold, because you likely have mold somewhere and you may or may not have the sensitivity to it. So that's my input.
Okay, we'll go with Jim here.
I'll just add to that. One fellow was having mold sensitivity. He said that he gave me a call, and I said, how much water do you drink every day? He said, at least a glass, maybe two. Well, of course you're going to be probably affected by a whole lot of things, including GERD. So I told him, I said, try drinking 6 glasses a day. So I drink tea. I said, well, often teas and soups and things, they're fluids, but your body treats them as a food, and then the rest is a waste product. So water really should be consumed alone, and also that water and salt combined, sea salt. There's a ratio like 4 quarts oil in your car. Generally, about a teaspoon of sea salt is recommended per gallon of water that you drink. Now, you can put it on your food or in your water, however you want to do it. But that way you keep your salt mineral balance and helps keep your body alkaline. Or drink this alkaline water that I bring every month over here. That's about a 10 pH. And I've had people get rid of GERD in as little as 1 day. 1 day. But they were just basically dehydrated. That was their main problem. And if it's not that valve you're talking about, which I'd like to know how to do that myself, I'd recommend that. Also remind you, this is my 86th video, and they're all sitting right down there. And we have them each for $15. There's a list of them, all 86, including John Gray, who's coming next month. So if you want to get a copy of the recent presentations, take a look at the list, and there's something for everybody there. So thank you.
Hello. So last year, John Gray told us about the Chinese cure for illness, in which you take a position of repose downwind from fragrant rose gardens. So I've got a bucket of roses here, and you can all take them home, but wait till after the presentation.
Great.
I'll just comment on the GERD issue. I don't know if this is like everybody knows this or not, but if I sleep on my left side, it makes a huge difference than on the right side. Left side's much better because then gravity keeps it away from the valve.
Huh. That's it, correct?
I think most of us know about the neti pot, but for colds, allergies, sinus infections, don't underestimate the neti pot. It's amazing. You put in, tell you about the neti pot. It looks like a little Aladdin's lamp without a top. You put in warm filtered water, half a teaspoon of good salt, like a kosher salt or a sea salt. You mix it up really well. You put the spout at one nostril, hold the other nostril and create a suction. And all the stuff that you breathe in during the day that your body begins to become inflamed from, if the body hasn't naturally gotten rid of it, the saline solution runs through your passages and carries it out. And it's like brushing your teeth. You just get into the habit of doing that. And you do it at night, not in the morning, because during the day is when you're breathing all this gook in. So at night, if you do it in the morning, that some people did, it's festering all night long. You can get that from the Himalayan Institute. I think it's HimalayanInstitute.org.
Actually, Walgreens sells it along with a good powder to use too.
Neomed's also easier to use.
Neomed's a lot easier to use. Yeah. That you just spray straight up in your nose.
That's a spray, right?
No, it's actually squirts the whole thing up, and you turn your head sideways and let it flow out the other side, so you don't have to worry. You can snort it at the same time.
Do you put your own solution in there, Jim?
Eventually you'll make your own solution. It comes with all these little packets, which is a potassium-sodium balance you put with your water, so it's akin to your body.
They have the mixed amount. It's more pure than the one you would probably use. Where do you buy it? Costco has it now.
Most drugstores, Neomed is the brand name.
Costco has it now. I'm surprised.
Nasal wash.
For GERD, I've had pretty good success with a product from Life Extension called Esophaguard. It's based on something called D-limonene, which they extract from some citrus fruit. And it's really weird. You take like one pill every other day for 10 pills, and then GERD clears up for several months after that. They don't really know how it works, and the speculations that they have sound pretty iffy to me, but it does seem to work pretty well.
What's it called?
Esophaguard, like esophagus guard. And it's a Life Extension Foundation product. I think there are probably other brands of it too.
Beverly?
Turns out I've been living with mold, $40,000 worth of it, where a gutter was in the house, and it's been dripping down, and nothing showed inside the house, nothing showed outside the house. And I've had a cough ever since we've been in the house. So I'm sure I'm infested with mold, and I'd be very interested in some suggestions on how to treat myself.
Well, I have lots.
Oh, okay.
I've just put about $150,000 into dealing with mold. 10,000 last week, in fact. So I think the thing about mold is you have to get away from it. And if you have some kind of broken something, you have to take it apart and get rid of it. I just had a mold abatement company in last week. We had a broken pipe in the wall. And I guess it had been festering for 3 or 4 years, and I didn't really construe what the problem was because we haven't really been living in this house. But at any rate, we cut into the cabinet and into the wall, and sure enough, the pipe was broken and the flooring was screwed up. The cabinet had to be thrown out and replaced. Then they went underneath the house and fixed the dirt and sprayed and scrubbed the wood, and then they ran a machine for at least a week that scrubbed the air under the house. And then the attic actually was full of fiberglass that was infested with mold. And so I had thought to replace the heating system in the ducts. So I went and replaced the heating system in the ducts, and in the process of replacing the ducts, they scooped the moldy insulation into the ducting system. So we ripped that out, and then we took out all the insulation, and now we're in the process of, and they had to come in twice to get all the insulation out. They didn't even get it out the first time. So if you go down